My name is Daniel, and I'm 22. For the past year, I've encountered a lot of crazy people and have accumulated even more crazy stories. While most of them would make you laugh, the one I've chosen to share was terrifying while it was happening and still gives me shivers when I remember it. A little more than a year ago, I applied for and got a job at my favorite convenience store across the street from my house. I'd moved there my sophomore year in college and decided to stay after I left school. This little store served as a savior to me. Living as young men often do, I had very little money, but was always confident I could find something to fill my belly regardless of how much was in my pocket at the time. When the time came that I was no longer able to rely on my parents for money, the corner store was the first place I went for a job. I was in luck. Only the day before, one of the employees was fired for stealing from the register. I took his place and I've been here ever since. Like any other corner store, we sell alcohol, beer, wine, and liquor. Naturally, this makes us a beacon for the local drunks. These folks have served as countless hours of entertainment. While most are harmless, on one specific occasion, a horribly violent outburst occurred. It was a quiet Saturday night about an hour before closing. Most of the regulars had made their appearances, a few more than once. The two involved in this incident had been in around 7 p.m. and had just returned. They appeared to be a couple. I'd seen them around the neighborhood since I moved in, and the owner of the store said they'd been customers since he bought the store 13 years ago. Although they were not very talkative when they came in, I never had any reason to believe either could be violent. However, that night, something had changed. Upon arriving the second time, they went straight to the cooler containing the large beers, nothing out of the ordinary. But tonight, an argument between the two started soon after. At first, I couldn't hear what it was about, but soon their voices were loud enough to carry across the store. I minded my own business for a while, but once the woman began screaming curse words at the man, I felt I had to at least get them to take it outside. I wasn't sure what to say, but I began walking toward the opposite side of the small store. Before I was halfway there, the man started screaming back at the woman. I'm not sure exactly what she had said to him, but it had obviously infuriated him. Mere moments before, he had taken a quart bottle from the cooler. Suddenly, he began striking down at the woman's head with it. I'm not sure if he thought it would break or if he intended on hurting her with the nearest thing. But strike after strike, he continued. It was a horrifying thing to witness. Following the fifth or sixth strike, the woman dropped completely to the floor and stopped moving. The guy stood over her for a moment but looked up when he heard me running toward him. The second he saw me, he ran out the side door and disappeared into the darkness. The sight of her lying there made me sick to my stomach. The blood dripping from her ears was almost as shocking as the ever-growing pool around her head. It seemed like a bad idea to touch her, so I decided to let the paramedics check her for a pulse when they arrived. She was still alive, but they didn't have much hope for her survival. The cops weren't in any hurry to get there, but when they did finally arrive 45 minutes later, I filled them in on all I had seen. From the way they reacted, I got a strong feeling they were very familiar with the two. While on shift a few days later, my boss called with some news. The woman was brain dead, and her family had made the choice to let her pass. The cops had picked the guy up the following night. From the description my boss gave me, he didn't even seem to remember what had happened. The doctors who examined him said it was likely he truly may not remember what he did because many years of alcohol abuse had possibly destroyed his brain. It sounded like he might not get the full punishment due to him under the law. I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Sometimes it seems like people really do get away with murder. During my time in college, I had a friend whose dad owned a large piece of land in eastern Texas. In the past, he had leased it out to hunters and paper companies, but was no longer doing it. He had built a cabin on the land a few years before, and would let us go out there from time to mess around. It served as a great way to relax from the pressures of school and get closer to nature. The spring break of 1997, we loaded up our trucks and headed for the cabin. Our plans included shooting guns, drinking beer, and other things guys like us did in the woods. Our first morning kept us busy cleaning the cabin and moving all our stuff inside. Around dinner, we made a big fire outside and cooked steaks and fried potatoes. We skipped dessert and broke open some beers. The sun went down not long after, and for the remainder of the evening we got loaded and passed around a joint or two. At some point in the night, I heard a shuffling noise outside and went to check. The fire was barely burning at that point, and just outside of its light, I swore I could see the shape of a man standing completely still. From what I could tell, he was facing me, perhaps waiting to see what I would do. I blinked my eyes real hard to get a clear look, but my position and the lack of light made it hard to see. The shape continued to stand still, so I decided I'd walk a little closer in hopes of getting a better picture. The thought terrified me, but I was transfixed. I took 2 steps forward, but was distracted by a voice behind me. My friend had woken up and noticed the door wide open, so he saw me walking around the fire. His voice caused me to jump a little, but I soon realized who it was. I asked him if he saw the figure on the other side of the fire pit. He just laughed and said I must be so stoned I was seeing things. We laughed it off and returned to bed. On my way, I turned back to take one more look, but the shape was no longer there. The next morning, I brushed the whole experience off as the result of too much fun and went on with my day. We spent the first half fishing at the pond, and after lunch we shot guns and tested a new compound bow. The beers and smoke were broken out after dinner, and a game of poker was attempted but soon cancelled in favor of another evening telling stories around the fire. On one of my many trips to relieve myself that night, I was spooked by the sound of a stick breaking close by and hurried back to the fire. The look of fear on my face made the other guys laugh. I tried to explain, but they reminded me we weren't the only creatures in the woods. The reasoning seemed sound, so I accepted it. Not long after, we were standing around in deep discussion, and I turned to speak to the guy on my left. What I saw caused me to freeze. Standing within a few steps behind my friend was another man I did not recognize. It was like he appeared out of nowhere. What made it creepier was that he was staring intently at the back of my friend's head. I realized he was the same being I had seen lingering outside the firelight the night before. He was average height, with a long, unkempt beard. My friend continued rambling, unaware. After several long seconds, the stranger turned to me with a blank expression and walked away. This was when my friend finally noticed my horrified look. I began pointing and rambling about what I had just witnessed, but again they laughed. No one was buying it, and eventually I shut up. The next 2 days were quiet. By our 5th morning, I was beginning to question my sanity. I had seen this mysterious being twice, and now he had suddenly disappeared. Later, we went on a hunt for wild hogs. After following tracks, we stumbled upon 3 large hogs rooting around. 2 of us chambered rounds and took aim. I was less than a second from pulling the trigger when a loud crack of another rifle filled the air, followed closely by a burst of wood above my friend's head. It took a moment to realize we were being shot at. A second shot came even closer. We didn't wait for a third. My friend led us down a side trail back to the cabin. Instead of safety, more shots followed. We hopped into my truck and sped out. This was before cell phones, so we had to drive 20 miles to town for help. After explaining the situation, we returned later with deputies. We waited, but nothing happened. A cursory look found holes in the cabin, and another in my buddy's windshield. Strangely, all of our camping gear was spread out on the ground. Nothing was missing except a box of ammo and my sleeping bag and blanket. The deputies suspected a squatter or poacher. Once my friend's dad, who owned the land, heard about it, he pressured them to search. For a week, they found nothing but old camps. It was assumed he had moved on. Because of a chance of another attack, our trips ended. Within 5 years, my friend's dad had a heart attack and lost interest in the cabin. The land was leased out again. Each time I jot down a quick note, I'm reminded of those trips, and especially that terrifying week that caused them to stop. Sometimes I still wonder why the stranger seemed so focused on my friend, and perhaps more concerning, if he's still out there waiting to finish what he began. No, I live in a major city in Texas now. My apartment complex is gated and in a good neighborhood, but the security isn't extremely tight. Sometimes the gates are left open, and anyone can follow someone else in. A couple of times in the past 3 years, management has put out notices of vehicle break-ins and items stolen from porches. We also have frequent solicitors, even though signs forbid it. One Friday evening, I went to bed at about 2:30 a.m. I had trouble sleeping, so I put on a podcast and started to doze. Suddenly, I became aware of a noise, a clicking sound. At first, I thought it was my neighbors. After about 30 seconds, I realized the noise was extremely repetitive and getting louder. Then it hit me. It was coming from my door. I leapt out of bed and headed to the foyer. The lock mechanism was moving back and forth rapidly, like someone was trying to unlock it. An object was inserted into the lock, and they were forcing it. I instinctively turned around, unlocked my bedside safe, and pulled out my pistol. I loaded it and chambered around. As I exited the bedroom, I saw the lock twist and unlatch. I immediately pointed my weapon straight ahead, knowing if someone came through, I would have to react instantly. I decided if they came in, I would give them a momentary chance to retreat, but if they did anything else, I would shoot. They didn't enter, however, because I had also locked the deadbolt. Only when I first moved in had I gotten into the habit of always keeping it locked when I was home. That decision saved me from a life or death confrontation. I approached the door and looked through the keyhole. On the other side were 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman, all wearing hoodies. The men had objects in their hands I couldn't identify. They were talking back and forth, trying to figure out why they couldn't open the door. The woman spoke loudly, repeating something about an apartment number that didn't even exist in our complex. I jabbed the door hard with a broom handle to let them know I was inside. They immediately stopped and ran off. I debated calling the police, but decided against it since they would be long gone. The next day, I filed a report and told management. They said it was unusual, but would increase police presence. Nothing more ever came of it. 7 months later, no further incidents occurred. I don't think they'll be back, but I took the precaution of installing a smart lock so the deadbolt stays locked even when I'm not home. It's crazy to think that deadbolt was the only thing between me and an armed confrontation. If there's one good thing, I feel confident I stayed calm and was ready for the unthinkable.